My name is Jim Henderson. I'm the independent candidate for Secretary of the Commonwealth. It is now about 20 past 12 on Wednesday, October 27th. We should have been down at Suffolk Law School, about 2 blocks from here, debating the issues that are important to the Secretary of the Commonwealth's race this year. Unfortunately, Mr. Galvin, the incumbent in this office, backed out on his commitment to debate me and my Republican opponent. This office is about providing good information to the people of Massachusetts. And Mr. Galvin has failed in his opportunity to, in fact, provide information to the voters of Massachusetts in these last days of this election. I look at the office of Secretary as being the chief information officer of the state. The chief information officer needs to be able to provide good information to the people of the state so they can make good decisions about how they live their lives, how they operate their businesses, and in fact, how they vote on election day. And it's unfortunate that Mr. Galvin has chosen not to honor that commitment that he took on when he took over this office 16 years ago. But I want to speak about what we can do for the benefit of the people of Massachusetts. As Secretary, I'm going to make sure that information about government is freely and easily available to the people of Massachusetts. Right now, for instance, you can't go online and find out how your state representatives or your state senators vote. And that's just not what we should expect from our government in the year 2010. We should have an election system that encourages people to vote, that gets more people out throughout the state to vote on election day. But we also want to have a system that encourages more people to run for office, so we have more and better choices when it comes to election time. I've had a chance to talk with a lot of people around the state about some of their concerns. And people are concerned about the secrecy they have in government. We need to have a government that's open and thoughtful and is willing to be accessible to the people, unlike Mr. Galvin here today. I've had a chance to talk to some people who've had their own challenges with the Secretary's office. And I have a couple letters I want to read, but I'd like to actually introduce and invite Mr. Stephen Buckley, who's come up from Chatham today, to speak briefly about some of the challenges he's had with the Secretary's Public Records Division. Would you come over here and we got the microphones here and the cameras set. So, Steve, thanks for coming. I appreciate it. So, Steve, please share what your challenges have been with the Secretary's office.
Well, first I should say I'm from my hometown is Chatham, Massachusetts. Grew up there, but I spent 25 years in Washington as a internal auditor for several federal agencies. And basically, my job was to make sure that people were following the rules and regulations and policies and procedures that they were supposed to do, and hold them accountable and find out things while they were small and before they got into the newspaper. So that's I was trained, and that's my experience. That's an experience with a state agency, and a friend of mine asked me to look into it, he was trying to find out what the policies and procedures were for the agency formerly known as the Department of Social Services. Now they've changed their name, so it's the Department of Children and Families, but most people will know them notoriously as DSS. So in any event, I was trying for years and years to get a copy of just their policies and procedures. This is not top secret, confidential information. This is something that every government agency should make available on their website, how we operate. And they just never gave me any response. And so, in accordance with the Public Records Law, I turned to the Secretary of State's, the Secretary's office. And if the agency doesn't respond within 10 days, then the Secretary's office is supposed to make sure that state agencies fulfill their responsibilities to be transparent and make sure that we are able to hold them accountable. I have a letter I gave to Jim. He seemed to be the only one that was interested in the idea that the Secretary's office would write me a letter saying, well, they didn't respond to you, so therefore there's nothing we can do about that. It was the idea that they didn't have a piece of paper in which to judge the failure of the state agency to respond, So since they didn't have a piece of paper, they were saying in the letter that I got from them saying, we can't do anything. So it's basically an open secret, I think, because I've had this experience with another agency, but I think it's an open secret that all you have to do to avoid having to comply with the public records law is don't write anything, don't respond, don't do anything, because of this policy that the secretary has about not responding at all.
Great, thank you, Steve. I appreciate it.
We need to update the public records law in Massachusetts to recognize that in our lives today, we work with emails, we work with electronic documents, and the documents that Steve was talking about should be easily and readily available online. It shouldn't take a runaround with the Secretary's office or even a failure to get information out of the Secretary's office for citizens of Massachusetts to get information about their government. We need to improve our systems here in the state. I want to quickly read two letters here. One is from a woman up in North Reading, about a nonprofit corporation. As soon as this truck goes by, I'll read this out here. On Friday, October 22nd, 2010, I received a postcard from the Secretary of the Commonwealth, William Galvin, advising me I need to file an annual report with the State Corporations Division for my daughter's Memorial Scholarship Fund. I will be happy to fill this obligation to the state. The postcard advises that I may file the report electronically with the division's website, provides the web address, and instruct me to use my customer ID number and PIN number to file the report. Both the ID and the PIN numbers are listed on the front of the card, immediately above my address. Printing my ID and PIN numbers on a card is nothing short of a breach of confidentiality. How many hands did that card pass through before it was placed in my mailbox? I am not pleased to know that the Secretary of State's office is involved in such careless handling of private information. This is from Penny Richards of
North Reading. The Secretary earlier this year released information, private information about 139,000 people to a press organization. Released public, not public information, but private information about their social security numbers, their height, their weight, their eye color, and that came out of the Secretary's office. We need to make sure that someone is in that office who knows how to distribute public information, but also knows how to make sure that private information remains private. Lastly, I want to read this letter. This is from a gentleman named Paul Eggerman, who's the former CEO of eScription and is a well-known software entrepreneur here in Massachusetts. He wrote this email to me last night.
Earlier this year, I tried to contact Secretary Galvin. I was not looking for a job or for any special treatment. I intended to be helpful to the Secretary on a policy issue. I made 6 attempts to call or meet with Secretary Galvin or somebody in his office. After about a month of trying, I was able to arrange to meet with 2 members of his staff at the State House. The meeting was a disappointment as the staff's attitude was closed-minded. I left the State House knowing that I had wasted my time. The unresponsive attitude is particularly troubling for this official. The Secretary of State is the state's chief information officer. His job is to help citizens obtain access to government.
And this is from somebody who has been very involved in political matters for many, many years. He was trying to do good work to actually provide the Secretary some guidance on how to make sure that we know that our voting systems can be trustworthy. And he went to the Secretary and he was blatantly ignored. We need a new spirit in this office. We need a spirit of innovation. We need a sense that we can actually look forward 5 years rather than simply looking back 10 years. We need to recognize that our culture, the people today, are expecting more from our government. They're expecting more access, more transparency.
I talked earlier about the fact that the Secretary is the Chief Information Officer. Not only does the Chief Information Officer need to make sure that information is freely and easily available, but the Secretary also needs to be sure that that information is overseen by somebody who understands the technology of the day, who understands how we make good use of technology to provide easy access, whether it's online, whether it's through mobile devices, what have you.
We have a choice here between Mr. Galvin, who's been in this office for 16 years and is a fan of the status quo. He is not up there to make any changes for the benefit of the people. We have a Republican in this race who's a nice man, but has a single issue that he cares about. And frankly, I disagree with a lot of what he says. Not all, but a lot. But my issue is not with the policy, it's how we operate this office. And we need to make sure that this office is operating for the benefit of the people of Massachusetts, is operating in a way that is consistent with the year we live in, not back in like in 1990 or 1980. I pledge to you that I will be an accessible secretary for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I pledge that I will provide good information, and I will work hard to make sure that people, if they have challenges getting information about government, I will work to make that, to solve those issues as quickly as I possibly can. I'm going to work hard to make sure that we provide better access to the polls for everybody in the Commonwealth, whether they're military voters serving overseas or people in ethnic communities who speak other languages. Everybody who is a U.S. citizen at the age of 18 or older should have the chance to vote in this great Commonwealth. And I pledge to make that happen if elected to this office. Finally, I think it's important to say that I run as an independent because it's not about promoting one particular group of people, one particular party, one particular community, but be able to serve everybody in the Commonwealth. That should be our pledge, that we should be a welcoming, engaging, and embracing community. And I'm going to be the secretary that makes that happen. So on November 2nd, next Tuesday, the most important thing you can do is go out and vote. You should do that. But when you get to the Secretary of State on the ballot, I humbly ask that you check off my name, you black out the box, whatever it is you do in your community, and vote for me, Jim Henderson, for Secretary of the Commonwealth. With that, if anyone has any questions, I'd be glad to answer.